For the past decade, I've been cataloging Teen Wolf canon, and for almost that long, I've been listening to people complain about Scott McCall.
I never liked how they made Scott be so
There
weak.
is going to be a 7th season. Please let Scott be a good alpha for once. Since he became the alpha, he
Exactly,
was
Scott
so
is weak
We
AF.
were always hearing about how powerful true alphas are. And yet we see Scott get beat by literally every
Scott
other
is probably
character.
the weakest alpha in the whole of Teen Wolf
Scott may
universe.
be a true alpha, but he always gets his butt whipped by his betas.
I just cannot relate to this sentiment. I never felt Scott McCall was really weak when compared to the rest of the werewolves. Yes, he almost lost every one-on-one fight he was in up until season 4. Yes, he almost lost his entire pack and his life because he didn't listen to Styles in season 5. But I don't think Scott is weaker than anybody else on the show. Scott's just this guy, you know? If you enjoy these weekly jaunts back to Beacon Hills, subscribe to the channel and let YouTube slip into your notifications to alert you when I post new content. I think the perception of Scott's weakness comes primarily from unrealistic expectations on the part of the viewers. Part of this is Peter's fault. Throughout season 1, we saw the Big Blue Harry, and everybody expected that powerful werewolves were that guy. Okay, that's Jeff Davis's fault too for not making it blatantly clear that this form is wrong and not something to strive for. Damn you TV writers and your nuanced approach in using monsters as stand-ins for violent human tendencies. Grrr. But it's not just Jeff's fault. There is a deeper trend in genre TV and films that creates some unrealistic audience expectations as well. It's the trope of sudden power, which for some reason in some shows equates to sudden expert-level fighting skills. Let's use Buffy for a second. I know at the time of this recording that show's creator is currently canceled, but I do love me some Buffy. Buffy trained constantly to be a good fighter, but the vampires on the show all seem to automatically know martial arts as soon as they climbed out of the grave.
But he's new. He doesn't know his strength. He might not know those fancy martial arts skills they inevitably seem to pick up.
I'm sure this was just to make fight scenes better on screen, but the perception that gets into the zeitgeist is that supernatural abilities mean instant fighting skills, and that's wrong. So we kind of brought this expectation with us into Teen Wolf and then took it out on Scott when he didn't live up to the misguided headcanon. I won't go over the actual canon on the werewolf versus monster thing. I did a whole video on that subject that you probably saw. Let's just focus on Scott and the complaints that he never lived up to what everyone seemed to expect. First, Scott was a relatively weak kid when Peter bit him. He became stronger and his reflexes improved immediately. But all he had inside was the experience of that weak kid. He had no idea how to fight before, so why would he automatically know how to fight now? Also, despite what some characters said in some episodes, the overwhelming evidence presented on the show is that all werewolves are basically the same. The strength is automatic, but how you use that strength comes from experience and practice. The only reason why alphas are perceived to be stronger in universe is because you usually have to kill an older, more experienced werewolf to attain the status of alpha.
I'm the alpha now.
But baseline, werewolves all have the same set of special abilities, whether they be betas or omegas or alphas. All the things we saw alphas do are experience things, either fighting skills or just knowing the extent of their own strength.
Ready for a rematch?
It does get a little tricky with the Alpha Pack because they actually absorbed werewolf abilities from others, which did seem to boost their baseline. But they were strong and good fighters before that because they had to be in order to become alphas. I'm getting off track. In Season 3, we saw Scott seek help from the twins because he wanted to roar to change Malia back. But he feared doing that and losing control if he shifted.
I thought you guys were gonna teach me to roar.
We are. You do it by giving in. Giving in and letting go. That's how Deucalion taught us control.
This was presented as an alpha thing. But Scott had this same booming roar all the way back in Season 1 once he figured out how to do it. The actual alpha status, as we saw with Scott's rise to true alpha, comes from leadership ability. So this alpha roar is a command from a leader that other werewolves and were-coyotes recognize and react to instinctively. Unlike every other alpha on the show, Scott rose to the status on his leadership ability alone. He actually formed a pack around him way back in Season 1.
I think I'm finally getting why you keep refusing this, Scott. You're not an Omega. You're already an Alpha of your own pack.
By the end of Season 2, he was already an Alpha. His eyes just didn't reflect that fact until Season 3 during a moment of great emotional and physical exertion. Now, he didn't automatically achieve some instant superpower at this moment. He was still the same relatively inexperienced werewolf we'd seen the day before. And you have to keep in mind that Scott had been a werewolf for only like 8 or 9 months at this point in the timeline. Pretty much he'd be like any other werewolf with that level of experience, the only difference being the red eye and the stubborn trait Scott had of always doing the right thing.
You have the eyes of an alpha, but where's the strength?
So here, a few weeks later, when Kincaid commented on Scott's lack of alpha strength, he was surprised because most alphas one would encounter in this universe would have to be killers, who gained and maintained their status at least partially through physical strength and fighting abilities. It is unlikely that Kincaid would have seen or even heard of a true alpha, since that status is so rare. Plus, I mean, look at this guy. If they weren't werewolves, Kincaid would kick his ass in a second, give them the same level of extra strength and agility, and he still kicks Scott's ass because he's bigger and he knows how to fight. I mean, what is Scott supposed to do? Leadership Kincaid into submission? Big guys beat small guys unless small guys have some serious Mr. Miyagi moves.
Wax on, wax off.
Man, I cannot stay on topic today for shit. Okay, from the minute Scott became an alpha, he feared losing control and going too far. All that is rooted in his experience with Peter's murder spree. It's not an irrational fear, it's very real. But it doesn't make him weak, it makes him cautious. When Scott faced Peter at the end of Season 4, he had just learned an important lesson. He had faced that greatest fear in the fight with the hunters at the warehouse. He was able to pull himself back from the edge in that instance, so when he faced Peter later, he knew where that edge was and could better utilize his strength without the fear of going too far. Peter, on the other hand, was out of control here and could not utilize his strength intelligently. What else? Oh yeah, Liam beat Scott nearly to death that one time in Season 5, so Liam must be stronger than Scott, right? No, Liam is not stronger than Scott. Scott was trying to contain Liam without hurting him, and he took a beating to do it. This was exactly what Derek did for Cora and Boyd in Fireflies back in Season 3. Scott was was also at a major disadvantage with Liam due to the mountain ash Theo slipped in his inhaler, but he did manage to stay alive, right up until that bastard Theo stepped out of the shadows and killed him. I keep thinking of other examples, but you get the gist. Scott was not weak. He's just this guy who happens to be a relatively new werewolf, and he doesn't want to hurt anybody. Thanks for watching, and do all the YouTube things, like the video, comment and tell me how I got everything wrong, and if you feel like it, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time we go back to Beacon Hills.